When it comes to making a decision for running for public office, and you've done this before, you were in the state house and the state senate, you're looking at governor, you're obviously concerned about, you're thinking about getting back in. And not a lot of people do that over time. And the conversation that has been going on most recently is about public safety and defunding the police. Right. What do you make of this movement, and have you seen the Legislative Black Caucus's agenda for the upcoming special session, which is projected to be in August?
I think that's one of the most driving forces for my thoughts of coming back, because I know people want to feel secure in their state. They want to feel like that the government is offering them the safety of their properties and their persons. And I think when I see all these initiatives coming out, these battle cries to defund police, I don't think that is the majority. I think people realize that there has to be a need for law enforcement out there in order to keep their families safe, their properties, all the things that they do. I mean, it is so integral part of a free society. And I think that with what the Black Caucus came out with the other day was way too far. I mean, I think what you're going to end up doing, there's some things on there that I think is meaningful. I think we can do some of those things, more uniform training, tracking bad police officers. The state police have been advocating for a system in order to be able to track bad law enforcement officers for a long time, since I was in there in the 80s. And, basically most police officers don't want the bad apple. It's like anything, bad ministers, bad teachers, whatever. They just give a black eye to everybody when something happens. And so, there's things that we can do, but, there's a few things on there. The sovereignty issue.
Let's try to go down the list here. I have it in front of me, and okay. I think there are some, to your point, I think there are some things where people would readily agree there need to be improvements on transparency, data collection, training. I don't think anyone has a problem with that. That's just better management of personnel, right?
And it's only not there because of funding. I mean, they're the ones that let's give you the state police. Since I've been there, they've been cut $100 million over the last 10 years. So they're already being defunded.
Wow. I don't think people know that that's gone on.
Yeah, because they're, as we were in budget crunches, public safety is the one that gets hit the hardest. And, that's why you're seeing 250 troopers short out there, because they didn't get to have the academy to bring them in. They didn't get they don't do. When I was a trooper, we trained more often. You don't train as often now because you got to make those budget cuts. Your equipment is not up to date. All these cuts that are being made is why you don't have the adequate training and so forth.
Well, it's interesting how they changed the language here in the listing when it comes to funding. They didn't say defund, they said divest. Right. Did you see that too?
Right.
I mean, they know that's a bad it's a bad political language.
So let's talk about divest in taking money and moving it to mental health, instead of having a law enforcement officer respond to a mental health situation. Let's say that there's someone in with a psychological issue going on, and the family calls the individual, the police, and saying, we can't control our husband, our son, or whatever. We need the police to come. He's acting abnormal. He's talking like he's going to kill someone. Is that social worker equipped and qualified to go in there at that time? Probably to have a conversation, but on most occasions, an individual like that is not thinking clearly. they can grab a knife, they can grab a screwdriver, they can grab a pencil, and they can really hurt an individual in a situation like that. So the police are still going to have to be involved, and de-escalation training is something that law enforcement is trying to do now, but funding is an issue again. When I was out there, there was very little insight on de-escalation. You basically restrained an individual, and when I say restraining, you didn't in the department that I worked in. There was no such thing as a chokehold. We were not trained to choke people. If you were going to choke them, your life better be in danger, and that's the misconception. They're throwing everybody in the same category. Not all departments train like that. So now you're going to put a mental health worker's life in jeopardy, and how many of them are going to willingly do that? And I just don't see that actually working.
I think if you and I were legislators, and we were trying to solve this problem, we'd probably say, well, let's take the money and put it to training the police officers in mental health, in de-escalation at the point of greatest
Absolutely.
public safety risk, and move it backwards from there. But I think to defund the police is not a good look for going to the broader public and saying, here's how we're going to improve your lives and use your tax money better by shifting it away from budgets we've already cut predominantly because of the other things that are eating up the state budget, most notably the Medicaid expansion, which is why I think the reforms that were passed over made it even more difficult. That was just
absolutely.
Opportunity. So anyway, we could go on too long, I'm afraid.
Well, and you and I agree 100%. I don't think defunding or taking away from the police is going to answer that problem. I mean, look right now what is going on in Richmond, and you're bringing police officers from all across the state in there, and you're leaving other areas like rural areas unprotected because these individuals they're short-manned already, and now they're all having to ascend on Richmond because of the possibility of taking it over in spots there.
Oh, so what we're seeing statewide, though, okay, you're putting pieces of the puzzle together that I don't think people are seeing. Because of the lower level of personnel, they have to draw from the rest of the state to shore up Richmond.
Yeah, 5 troopers in Grayson County is all they have, and they're taking 3 of them and sending them to Richmond. So you're leaving 2 troopers to work the whole county by themselves.
Wow. I don't think that's obviously that's not being told.
No, Richmond when I was a trooper, we had riots. We had the Greek Fest riot in Virginia Beach. We had the coal strike going on in Southwest Virginia. This is in 1989, I believe it was. And that year, I only spent out of that year probably 4 months in my home county because they were having to take us out of the areas and send us to where all the problems arise.
Okay.
And people don't realize how much strain that puts on law enforcement and the hours that they put in to manage these riot situations. And who better to be the chief executive officer than someone who has the street smarts and has been on the street fighting those battles?
Well, it's a compelling case to make for a candidate when this is the moment when people are looking for the dialogue on public safety, the dialogue on race relations, really solving the problem rather than taking the political advantage and turning it into something that doesn't actually change things. And I think people are hungry for change. I think universally people are saying what happened to George Floyd was a horrific killing. That guy did it. That was wrong. Let's fix the problems in the system. To your point, though, you're seeing overreach in the listing here. But I think we're okay with it. I think knowing you and knowing the process here, if a bill came to expand the use of body cams, you're probably be okay with that.
Go
ahead.
With funding.
With funding, right?
Yeah, because look, body cams, and I'm not sure you're familiar with this. Body cams require the Commonwealth attorney to have someone on staff to review these each day.
Oh.
and you can't just have a body cam. It requires the ability to take that footage to a Commonwealth attorney to review each day, and it has to be stored for a certain period of time. So you have, if you're going to expand it to the state police, you have some troopers that would have an hour drive to get to a Commonwealth attorney's office each day to leave the footage. I'm not opposed to body cams. Most state police and a lot of agencies already have video cameras in their cars. But people are saying you get more of a better view of from a body cam, which I somewhat disagree with, because I'm blading myself from the threat. So my camera is pointing this way because I'm in my protective mode to try to fend off any attack.
But overall, the use of body cams has, I think, reduced the incidents, at least the reporting of the incidents of police brutality, notwithstanding the ones we've seen up in most.
Absolutely. If you can find a way to adequately fund it and retain it, I think it's fine.
But from looking at this list, you see a laundry list of expenditures and increased funding, not divested.
Oh, no, this list that they have is going to cost $500 million to implement.
$500 million, because you were on Senate Finance, weren't you?
I was.
Okay, so you would know that the budget process, as far as you're selling to the Republican base voter out there, not only were you in public safety, but you understand the budgeting process and where you can find the cuts. What if the money didn't match the wish list? What do we do to increase revenue to pay for these things?
The only way that you can pay for anything in Virginia, because as you're aware, we operate on a balanced budget, is that you take away from, you do one of two things. You take away from education, transportation, any of the other factors that we're trying to fund, and put it into that special directive, or you raise taxes. And there's no free lunch.
There's no free lunch. Actually, I think the Republican base has gone well away from that since the time when we were elected, when we actually had a balanced federal budget. It was kind of like something to raise the banner on. People realize that, and they're going to be willing to pay for the government that they want, one way or the other. We're going to be associated with that cost. You might as well pay for it. Anything on here in particular, that list from the Legislative Black Caucus, the Senator Bill Carrico, that you find that's just a bridge too far? You said it was overreach. What is an overreach in this list?
Sovereign immunity.
The immunity issues.
Mm-hmm.
Explain it.
And let's talk about sovereign immunity just for a minute. Sovereign immunity means that the Commonwealth is immune from being sued on many bases. So if I'm operating outside of the realm of what I'm trained to operate on, you can't sue the Commonwealth. Do away with sovereign immunity in the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth start and I operated outside the realm of what I was trained to do. If I'm the law enforcement officer that wasn't trained to put my knee on an individual's neck and choke and ends up choking them to death, not only does the police officer get sued, but also the Commonwealth of Virginia. And at this point, because of sovereign immunity, the Commonwealth can distance themselves from the suit because they didn't train the officer to do it that way. The sovereign immunity protects the Commonwealth from frivolous lawsuits, as well as it protects law enforcement who is trying to do their job but reacts to a situation and it turns bad, and it happens in a split second.
Right, and I think you would also find objections to qualified immunity.
Absolutely.
And explain your opposition to that and what it means to someone like yourself who was a frontline law enforcement officer, an LEO, doing your job on a daily basis, patrolling the Commonwealth.
Well, your job is to react to someone's actions. So you're out there every day not knowing what that individual's mindset is to be. So if I'm stopping you on a traffic stop, 90% of them are going to be uneventful. but then you've got those 10% that maybe the person's having a bad day. There's going to be an argument that ensues, and depends on what their mindset is that day, it could end up in a fight on the side of the road. DUIs, you never know what a drunk individual is going to react. I mean, a drunk individual can either be combative or very mellow. So, you can get someone who's under the influence of alcohol or a drug, and then they would be mellow, they would be happy, laughing, and then all of a sudden it changed. So your job is to react to action. And when the general public, if they were put into a situation to where they have simulations, and if they just took time to do a simulation or two, they see how quickly things go bad, and how qualified immunity, if you're out there and you're trained to do a job and you have to react to a situation, there's always the chance that a mistake is going to be made.
Right.
And you're just held at too high of a standard.
And I think, having not an attorney and trying to understand these issues, how difficult it would be to retain people under those working conditions for, frankly, the pay that it's just not there.
It's not there. An example, the 15 and a half years I was in the state police, 7 of those years, my pay was frozen. So after 15 and a half years involved in a car wreck and ended my career, my average compensation was my average salary was $32,000 after 15 years of service. So what you have today is you have a new starting salary because of the work that I did while I was in the General Assembly to bring that to everyone's attention, and that salary is now starting salary about 48,000. Now, how's that compared to Texas and other places? Starting pay in Texas is 75,000 for a state police officer.
Wow.
But who's going to risk their lives every day under the attack that they're under for 48,000? And that's why the state police has had recruiting problems. Now let's talk about sheriff's deputies. They're starting
sheriff's deputies, and explain for the folks who don't understand the difference between the state troopers and the sheriffs and deputy sheriffs, because we have police departments, local police departments, who also have sheriff departments. And so we have a wide array of law enforcement officers in the Commonwealth.
So we have state police who are hired by the state, and their sole purpose is to be spread throughout Virginia. And there's somewhere around 2,100 in the Department of State Police that's scattered throughout Virginia. You have sheriffs who are elected by the people, who have deputies that work, and the way the language of is for deputies is there's one deputy per 1,500 population of that county. So the sheriff has under him deputies, 1 per 1,500 of the population of that county, and they serve at the leisure of the sheriff. So the sheriff has the ability to hire and fire at will employment deputies as work under him for that county, because he answers to the people. Now, as far as city and municipalities, they appoint their police chief, and those officers work for that police chief, and it depends on the funding that the city and municipality does. Now, sheriffs in big cities, all they are in control of is jails. They're basically correctional facilities. So let's now look at what happened in this General Assembly session. Delegate Guzman, she introduces the bill that allows unions to form in counties and towns, municipalities, and to have bargaining power. So what does that mean financially? That means that now, and to get to the point of what the Black Caucus is asking for, that means that these cities and municipalities and counties those deputies and those police officers can form a union, and they'll have bargaining powers. And where you have so much problems of where in Minneapolis you have a police officer who didn't use good judgment in the George Floyd case, who was protected by a union. He had 18 other complaints, but they have a union. They got to bargain with that union before they can do anything. So now we're starting down this road of watering down the right to work law in Virginia for the ability to form unions, teachers unions, police unions, and it'll all be on a local basis. Fortunately, they didn't allow it to go on a statewide basis, or you could have all state workers form a union and have bargaining powers. And that drives cost up. That doesn't drive costs down. And associations are different than unions. They advocate for the individuals, but they have no negotiating power with those that are in authority.
Well, I think the stunning thing a couple of stunning things about the Guzman bill that has local collective bargaining for public employees. One, she didn't explain the bill on the House floor.
Right.
Two, she refused to answer questions about it. So literally, the bill wasn't explained on the House floor. So people couldn't go back and say, "Oh, this is what it does." They literally refused to do it, and she's actually considering statewide office. But now, with the obvious problems of the public unions, that was the problem in Minneapolis. I mean, people are saying the problem is police unions. They are protecting the bad cops.
They are.
And now we're bringing them to Virginia. I mean, it just seems like, where's the wish list that says, "Oh, gee whiz, we shouldn't have done that"? You know, we could probably go back and change that one. Or, I mean, I think that's one that if I was a member of that caucus, I would not want to be running on that for re-election. We're importing the problems to the other states.
Well, and that one flies in the face of and contradicts what the Black Caucus has put out as far as what they're wanting to do to reform law enforcement. If you have a union, you don't have control of that because they have the bargaining power.
Well, they're protected. They're protected by their
protected.
And I think here's what's going to happen with Derek Chauvin, whatever his name is. He's not going to plead down to a lesser penalty. Yeah. He's going to try to go to court, get a jury, and have the police union pay for his attorney and try to get off.
Absolutely, and then he's going to use his training records, which he was trained that maneuver by his agency, and he's going to say, "I was trained to do this." And if you heard the video of excited delirium, is a psychological issue that people have when they're on any kind of drugs, and of course they're saying now he had methamphetamine and fentanyl in his system at the time. He's going to say, and it's recorded, that this is what we have to do in the case of excited delirium, that we have to restrain this individual until rescue gets there. Now, I'm not saying that's right, no, but I'm saying he's going to use it as, I was trained to do it this way.
That's what's going to happen. And my fear is, even if he's found guilty of, say, manslaughter, and they go down the list and say, how do you find on second-degree murder not guilty? How did you find on third-degree murder? You know, the tweets are going to go out straight away, he's not guilty. And by the time they get to the guilty verdict, the whole country's exploded again over all this stuff. And that's my fear with this whole thing. And this is why, you know, I can't believe we're actually going to try to have collective bargaining for local public, government. It's the cost driver alone is staggering. Plus, you import bad teacher protections. And then bad public employee protections, and that's not how you get rid of bad public. It creates less trust in government, in my estimation, and a lot more cost.
It does. It does create that, and it creates a cost that we can't afford. I mean, we're going to turn into a New York if we have tax-wise, property taxes and everything, because we're going to we're going to be at the mercy of a union on what we pay employees. And
Well, I think a lot of people leave. I think they've already left New York. They'll leave. They'll go to Florida. They'll go to Texas. They'll go to other low tax states and just say,
and this is what drives me to want to get back in. Look, as I said in the beginning, my family's been here. I'm a Virginian. I have been here all my life. I have sacrificed. I can tell you, if I do get in this, I can show you the scars that I've took for this state, the sacrifices I've made for this state. I have sacrificed more, and I will sacrifice a lot if I get in, financially and physically, to just do the job. But it's worth it to me that my family is able to live in Virginia that I grew up in and I love, and be a part of this state as it moves ahead. I just don't think that's who we are as Virginians. I think we are different than that. We're not the California of the East Coast as people. We have some leaders that wants us to be, and I use that term leaders loosely because I don't think they're leading very well. I think they're just going off of social media ideas and other states' ideas. We have to lead. We have to have strong leadership. And I am one of those that just don't back down. When I believe in something and I believe it's best for the people, I'm going to go for it.
Well,